15 richest people to have ever lived. Step aside, Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates. When it comes to the richest people in history, these massively wealthy tycoons don't even get a look in. In today's video, we'll be taking a look at the world's richest people to have ever lived. And trust me, Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates had nothing on them. From 19th century American industrialists to the African king who once owned half of the world's gold, here are the most moneyed people of all time, as guesstimated by leading economists and historians and adjusted for inflation. Genghis Khan, peak net worth, hundreds of trillions of dollars. The fearsome Mongol leader conquered a mind-blowing 12 million square miles of land between 1206 and his death in 1227, more than anyone else in history. But while his hordes pillaged their way through huge swaths of Eurasia, a territory that is now worth trillions of dollars, Khan didn't actually hoard his spoils and chose to redistribute the stolen loot and territory among his subjects instead. Emperor Shenzong of Song, peak net worth $30 trillion. Shenzong ruled China from 1067 to 1085 during the peaceful prosperity and primary abundance eras when he controlled around 30% of global GDP, which is the equivalent of $30+ trillion today. He was proficient at collecting taxes. However, the emperor's administration wasn't all about taking. His famous policies, which helped to improve the lives of the poor, are seen as a forerunner of the modern welfare state. Akbar I, peak net worth $21 trillion. He was known for his lavish lifestyle and patronage of the arts. And this emperor conquered hundreds of thousands of square miles of territory and ruled over much of the Indian subcontinent. He is known as the Mughal Empire from 1556 until 1605. He controlled around 25% of the world's GDP at the time, which would translate to a staggering $21 trillion today. Augustus Caesar, peak net worth $4.63 trillion. The first Roman emperor who ruled the vast empire from 27 BC until his death in AD 14 boasted a personal fortune equivalent to 20% of the entire empire's economy, which is worth $4.63 trillion nowadays. At one point, it is said that Augustus even owned Egypt. It didn't last long, however. Poor economic performance and a succession of military failures plagued his final years. King Solomon of Israel, peak net worth $2.2 trillion. According to the Bible, King Solomon ruled from 970 BC to 931 BC, and during this time, he is said to have received 25 tons of gold for each of 39 years of his reign, which would be worth billions of dollars in 2016. Along with impossible riches amassed from taxation and trade, the biblical ruler's personal fortune could have surpassed $2 trillion in today's money. Mansa Musa I of Mali, peak net worth $415 billion. Musa I is easily one of the richest people in history, amassing the equivalent of $415 billion during his 25-year reign from 1312 to 1327. The king of Timbuktu and Malian emperor, who controlled a huge empire which covered much of modern-day Mali and Ghana, had half of the world's supply of gold at his disposal, which was traded with merchants from as far away as Venice, Genoa, and Egypt. John D. Rockefeller, peak net worth $367 billion. Widely regarded as the richest American who ever lived, John D. Rockefeller founded the Standard Oil Company in 1870 and ended up controlling around 90% of the U.S. oil businesses. Economist Peter Bernstein estimates that the industrialist-turned-philanthropist had a personal fortune of $367 billion in today's money. Andrew Carnegie. Peak net worth, $337 billion. From humble beginnings in Scotland, Andrew Carnegie led the massive expansion of the U.S. steel industry in the late 19th century, amassing a personal fortune economists estimate would be worth $337 billion nowadays. As a full-on philanthropist, Carnegie gave away 90% of his fortune to various charities and educational establishments during the last years of his life. Tsar Nicholas II of Russia. Peak net worth, $300 billion. Nicholas Romanov ruled over the Russian Empire from 1894 to 1917, during which time he had full access to the nation's coffers, making him one of the richest monarchs in history. Not one to redistribute his wealth, a 1916 estimate of the Tsar's personal fortune equates to $300 billion in today's money. Osman Ali Khan, Asaf Jah VII, peak net worth, $230 billion. The last ruler of Hyderabad in India, Khan was absolute leader of the princely state from 1911 and 1948. And for a good part of the 20th century, he was known as the richest man in the world with an estimated fortune of $2 billion by the early 40s. This is the equivalent of 2% of the US economy, or around $230 billion today. Jacob Fugger, peak net worth, $277 billion. He was once praised as Jacob the Rich. The banker, merchant, and mining pioneer was Europe's richest man during the early 16th century. His enormous wealth enabled him to influence the politics of the time, funding the rise of the Holy Roman Emperor Maximilian I, as well as bankrolling the Spanish King Charles V. William the Conqueror. Peak net worth, $228 billion. The first Norman ruler of England, who famously invaded the kingdom in 1066, William the Conqueror seized lands and plundered treasures from Sussex to Yorkshire that would be worth $228 billion in today's money. He spent his lavish riches on everything from tapestries to castles, including the iconic White Tower at the Tower of London. Muammar Gaddafi. Peak net worth, $212 billion. Now, this name shouldn't be strange to anyone. In 2011, Libyan officials estimated that deposed leader Colonel Gaddafi squirreled away $200 billion in secret bank accounts, shady investments, and dubious real estate deals during his dictatorship, stolen from the country's massive oil revenues. Adjusted for inflation, this is the equivalent of $212 billion in 2016. Cornelius Vanderbilt. Peak net worth, $202 billion. Born in 1794 to a struggling family in Staten Island, Vanderbilt went from rags to riches during his lifetime, building up a colossal fortune in the railroad and shipping industries, and giving much of it away later on in life. At his peak, Vanderbilt is thought to have been worth $202 billion in today's money. Henry Ford. Peak net worth, $200 billion. Another familiar name, the founder of the hugely profitable Ford Motor Company, revolutionized vehicle manufacturing and brought the car to the mass market, selling over 1 million vehicles in 1920. It's no surprise then that upon his death in 1947, Ford was worth the equivalent of $200 billion in today's money. Who would have thought that at a time before now, some people were so rich that the richest people in the world will only be scratching the surface of their wealth? Now, if you find this very hard to believe, then watch some of our other videos and don't forget to drop a like, make sure you hit the subscribe button, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.